We organized a protest from Lahore to Islamabad, and we reached here in 3 days.
This is the fringe extremist group Tehreek Labaik Pakistan, talking to the newsmakers early on in their protest. In a matter of weeks, it grew into riots in major cities across the country. The group entered the limelight a few years ago, calling for the hanging of Asia Bibi, a Christian woman accused of blasphemy, and for celebrating Mumtaz Qadri. He was the policeman who assassinated Punjab's governor for trying to defend Asia Bibi. Qadri was eventually hanged for this crime, but Tehreek Labaik Pakistan still defends him as strongly as they do the Islamic tenets within Pakistan's constitution. That's why they stuck to their latest sit-in, even when the government sent in security forces to break it up.
We are protesting against the operation, the cruel action that the government is carrying out against a lawful demand regarding our holy prophet being made by our religious scholars and our leaders in Islamabad. We curse the government, and our demand is that the operation should be stopped with immediate effect.
That's after the Islamabad High Court had ordered them to clear the streets and end the siege to the capital. The protesters had made a series of demands, but the main objection was the changes in the oath for elected officials that's part of the constitution.
In Parliament, there was a bill about election reforms, and two constitutions were removed from our national constitution, 2 articles, 7B, 7C, about Qadianis. They call themselves Ahmadis.
They said these changes allowed the minority Ahmadiyya sect to pass themselves off as Muslims. Mainstream Muslims maintain they are heretics, and the Tehreek considers them traitors and agents of the West. The protesters demanded the resignation of the country's law minister, Zahid Hamid, for allowing the changes to happen. The government initially refused, but after the use of force backfired, the minister stepped down. Pakistan is already in the middle of a lot of political uncertainty. A top court recently disqualified Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and members of his close family from holding public office. That's after revelations from the leaked documents known as the Panama Papers. In them, the family's assets abroad led to the filing of corruption charges against them. Party leaders openly say the charges are politically motivated and privately blame them on Sharif's struggle with Pakistan's powerful military. It's all part of Pakistan's existential struggle over who actually runs the country. It's a situation laid bare by a few hundred demonstrators and ended with what the country's leading newspaper, Dawn, described as a capitulation by the authorities. Which then leads to the question, who actually runs the country? Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined from Islamabad by Ahmed Raza Qasuri. He was the legal advisor to former President Pervez Musharraf and also one of the writers of Pakistan's current constitution. Also in Islamabad, Taha Siddiqui, he's Pakistan's bureau chief for France 24. And in Lahore, we have Ahmed Rashid. He's the author of Pakistan on the Brink. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Ahmed Raza Qasuri, let me begin with you, sir. These people, Tehreek, Labaik, Ya Rasulullah, a Barelvi offshoot, they've shut down cities, including the capital. They've not wanted to negotiate. They were quite hard on their demands, and they've won. The government has caved in. The ministers resigned. How do you feel? It seems as if the government has caved in to extremists.
You see, the position is that the government of the day has lost its writ. You see, since the departure of Mian Nawaz Sharif, who were declared disqualified under the Constitution of Pakistan and application of Article 62 and 63, he was declared by the apex court of the country as a person who was disqualified. Since his departure, see, there is a government which is working and we have a prime minister. I call him a proxy prime minister because fortunately or unfortunately, he does not enjoy the power which a prime minister of such an important country should enjoy. So therefore, this was for 22 days there was total. Everything has come to a grinding halt, standstill, and unless the armed forces of Pakistan intervened, and in less than 24 hours, because the Pakistan armed forces are highly respected institution in our country, because people feel it's a highly disciplined.
Certainly, if you'll allow me to interrupt here. If the armed forces intervened and are highly respected, and they are the ones that clinched the deal, what did Pakistan get out of it? Because these guys seem to have completely won. And at the beginning of the sit-in and the protest, I must let you know, I met with this group. I spent time among them. They weren't joking about. They also want Asia Bibi executed. They call her a terrorist. They want the blasphemy laws to be more powerfully implemented, and so on, beyond the resignation of the minister. So if the armed forces came in and they're so well trusted, what did the Pakistani state get back? Because it doesn't seem as if they got anything back. It seems as if Tehreek, Labaik Rasulullah have won everything here.
You see, the position is that the government of the day dropped two major section 7B and 7C from the Election Act of 2017, and both these section deals with the prophethood of Holy Prophet of Islam, that he was the last prophet, and this is an article of faith with every Muslim anywhere in the world. Now these two provisions were dropped. Many people feel that they were dropped because the Americans were pressurizing and pestering the government of Pakistan from a couple of weeks that they should drop section 295B, which is a blasphemy law, and these two sections which I have just mentioned, 7B and 7.3, regarding the last prophethood of the Holy Prophet.
So do you support keeping it as it is? Do you support keeping it as it is and not amending it?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Okay, so let me. No, it's interesting.
Just a minute.
Yeah. Finish your point.
Unfortunately, one of those people who in 1974, I was then member parliament. We were about 20 people who moved a resolution, and on the basis of that resolution, the Ahmadis were declared non-Muslim.
Yep.
The rest of the member parliament have died. I am the only surviving member parliament who was a signatory of that important resolution,
right,
on the basis of which the Ahmadis were declared as non-Muslim.
On this point, you and those Barelvi extremists are on the same page then, because they told me, they said, we don't want, as they call them, Qadianis, we don't want them in government. This is going to open the door to them coming into government. Therefore, this must go away. This is an insult to us. It is blasphemy.
Because
so, in this sense, you agree with them?
It's Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Okay.
It's Islamic Republic of Pakistan, which came into being on the slogan of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So a country which came into being on the basis of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, there, if you drop a section of the law which deals with the last prophethood of Holy Prophet, well, that you are committing
I'm glad
a very
you told
big
us
mistake.
This. No, I'm glad you made it clear to us that you support this point of view. Ahmed Rashid, what can we learn from this? The protests, the aftermath, and what this means, given that the government has said, okay, we'll accede to your demands.
Well, I think it's been humiliating both for the government and for the military, because the military came in, when the military came in, they came in on the invitation of the civilian government, which had reached an impasse after 18 days of these people demonstrating and the demonstrations spreading to other parts of the country. The government failed to deal with it. They called in the army, but then the army did nothing, and actually then helped broker the deal with this group. And in that deal, there are about a dozen points and all those points go in favor of the group. None of them go in favor of the government. And people have been very, very angry at this, that not only the government but the army is also allowed such a deal to go through. Now, as far as the oath is concerned, the law minister, Mr. Zahid Hamid, did correct went back and corrected the mistake that had been made. He called it a clerical error. He apologized, but this group was still demanding his head, and in fact, he was forced to resign. Now, if the street protests are able to force government ministers to resign, and with the backing of the military and the whole state apparatus, it's a very poor reflection of democracy and the state effectiveness in Pakistan.
Taha Siddiqui, how do you think the state has handled this?
Well, it depends on which state you're talking about. Basically, in Pakistan, there is definitely the government, which is the civilian government, and then there is also the military, which is called the deep state. Now, as the earlier participant also mentioned, the military was basically involved in this whole episode. In actually, from what we understand, when the protesters came in and they sat down, there was a tweet that was issued from the army chief, and that basically said that both sides should refrain from violence, which reflects that how the military became an independent party and was not serving the government. And then we have also reports that the government tried to tell the military to come in and control the situation, and still the military was hesitant. The military did not go in, and then eventually the military was the one that brokered the deal. And one of the leaders, the Khadim Rizvi, he's come on TV recently only and said that it was the military that brought in the resignation. Then also that particular document thanks the army chief. So definitely, as far as the state handling is concerned, the government has weakened because of this whole episode, and the army has come out as sort of a victor and with a better standing. And that's what we understand here. Many of us here feel that this was not just about the law. This was not just about the law minister. This was about a greater design, and the design was to further undermine the civilian government, which we've seen repeatedly happening within this government before that, and sort of because we're moving towards the elections, and with the popularity that the ruling party enjoys, to dent that. So it has a bigger and greater design, and the state, some elements of state are involved in it.
Okay. Ahmed Rashid, I want you to listen to what Ahsan Iqbal, the Interior Minister, had to say to us. My colleague Ali Mustafa spoke to him very recently on our program, Straight Talk. Have a little listen to what he had to say about criticism regarding the deal.
Let me assure you that state is fully prepared to deal with any such incident. It is not that few people can take us hostage. It is not that they can dictate their agendas. We were very careful because of the nature of the issue, and also because of the coming election period, where we don't want anyone to get an excuse to become victim, play victim, or to excite unnecessarily people's religious sentiments. So we have dealt with it, but in Pakistan, majority of the people do not subscribe to any extreme version of religion.
Ahmed Rashid, he was very confident that they did it the right way. Do you buy that?
No, unfortunately I don't, because frankly they were totally ineffective. Look, there were no more than 2,000 or 3,000 demonstrators in Islamabad, and there were over 8,000 or 10,000 police who were watching over them. I don't think it would have been a problem if the police had gone in peacefully, obviously without guns or anything like that, and tried to round up. Now, they did arrest hundreds of the demonstrators, which have now been freed, but they didn't move in effectively. And I think the police were very scared. There were very confusing, contradictory orders being given to the police during this time. And finally, when the government decided to call in the army, which is perfectly constitutional, because it's a clause which says that the army can come in support of civilian power, the army also did nothing. And the government was completely taken aback by that. And very quickly, this deal was struck in which one government minister had to resign, another government minister in Punjab province is under scrutiny to resign, compensation was given to the protesters.
Right.
All the infrastructure damaged in the protest for 3 weeks was going to be paid for by the government. The protesters suffered nothing. They were not punished for anything, for breaking government property, for demonstrating, for holding up traffic or anything like that. And that's where I think the government has lost a lot of ground,
right.
And where the army has gained strength.
Ahmed Raza Kasuri, let me then ask you what happens next, because as I said, the resignation of the minister was one of their demands. They had other demands, such as the execution of Asia Bibi. They proudly held up the image of Mumtaz Qadri, the man who, in cold blood, executed, murdered an elected official for speaking out against the blasphemy laws, right? So this guy was their hero, and they weren't afraid to show that. They want alleged blasphemers to be killed, whether in the courts or on the streets. This is from me speaking to them. So let me ask you then, if they're going to get what they want when it comes to a politician resigning, what comes next? When they call for the execution of alleged blasphemers, is the state going to say, okay?
You see, the position is that the issue was very sensitive, and people are very particular about the dignity and reverence of Holy Prophet, because the whole religions open up with the love of Holy Prophet. So this is totally a different issue altogether. What people are saying, that if tomorrow another 2,000 people come and they ask government to do this, or resign, one of them should resign, I don't think the government would take it lightly. They will resist. But this was an issue which could spread like a cancerous growth in the body politic of Pakistan. And everybody saw that in all the main cities of Pakistan, there was total demonstration and lockout and,
But not necessarily, sir. These were a couple thousand people. They're an offshoot of the Barelvis, right? So they're not even the mainstream Barelvis. They're an offshoot of the Barelvis. When I was with them, there were a few hundred. It grew. They went from Lahore to Islamabad when I came across them. There were a few hundred after Jummah on a Friday. This wasn't tens of thousands of Pakistanis who were angry about the change to the law and the minister who had taken to the streets. This was a very small subsect who have got the government to blink, sir.
You see, the Mian Nawaz Sharif plan and strategy, since his departure from the government, he was constantly hitting two institutions, the Supreme Court of Pakistan, which is the apex court of the country, blatant violation of all the norms of decency. He was hitting hard the Supreme Court and indirectly, not directly, indirectly criticizing the armed forces of Pakistan. Now, this whole stunt, many people are of the view, was created that if the army were to enter into this facade and they open up fire, the army image and their reputation and their respect will lowered. And who will be the beneficiary? Mian Nawaz Sharif.
Okay.
And if they do not take action, then they will say that General Bajwa is probably is friendly toward the Ahmadis.
Okay,
so
you're not a
it
fan
was
of
a difficult situation. That's why, just let me finish. That's why when the army came, army made a public statement that the people's love, affection, and the confidence in the armed forces is the biggest asset of the armed forces of Pakistan. We will not disperse the crowd. We will only take care of the government installation like the Parliament and Supreme Court, the Pakistan Television Station, Radio Pakistan, and all other official building. That we will take care. But as far as dispersing of the crowds is concerned, that is the domain of the police and the rangers.
Okay. Taha Siddiqui, where do we go from here? Is democracy damaged, hurt, weakening? What's going to happen now?
Definitely, I mean, from as I was explaining earlier, the civilian space for the politicians and the parliament has been lost. And this is not the first time now that decisions are being made on streets. And we've seen that in the past, there were indications that the military establishment was behind it. In 2014, when Imran Khan did a similar sort of sit-in right in front of the parliament, one of his own deputies came out and said that he was being instructed by generals. And then there were reports similar to that. Earlier on in 2012 and 13, we saw Tahirul Qadri also coming and doing the same. And every time the democracy and the parliament has been weakened, further weakened. And again, this time around, we're seeing how the civilian government has lost space, the parliament has lost space, legitimacy, and we're already hearing of further protest planned in the coming days. So basically, there are powers in the country that do not want the parliament to run smoothly. There are powers that do not want the civilian government and the civilians to flourish, the civilian setup to flourish, and they want it they want to paralyze it, and that's what we've seen. This last week, what happened was a paralysis of Islamabad, paralysis of the Pakistani government, and it is just to show that and then they get what they want, because the military establishment is basically trying to also mainstream these radicals, not just Tehreek Labaik Ya Rasool, but also there is another group called the Milli Muslim League, which is from Jamaat Dawa, and a former general came on TV very recently and said that there is a plan to mainstream these radical Islamist groups, to de-radicalize them, as they say. But it's not just to de-radicalize them, it's to push their proxies into parliament, to push their proxies onto streets, and then control the government.
And the mainstreaming of extremist groups and alleged extremist groups is another topic that I want to have one or more of you on for in the not too distant future. But for the moment, I have to move on. So gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Taha Siddiqui, Ahmed Raza Qasuri, and Ahmed Rashid.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers.